Hello, good evening. Welcome, Samuel Trapp, International Flavor on Dam Radio. Very glad you're here tonight. Happy to be with you as well. I appreciate you joining us in on the show. I want to talk about the phone call between the arguably two most powerful folks on the planet. I suppose you could argue Modi or Xi Jinping, but I was talking the old Trumpster and the old Vladimir Putin. And there was an interesting call, interesting appearance. Old Vlad gave a 5-minute little blurb about the call, talked about it. There was a legal forum. Wish I'd have known about that. I'd have liked to go over to St. Petersburg for that. And Medvedev, who nobody wants to be the next leader, if you're on the side of America, that you want to talk about a reasonable guy. Let's talk about Vladimir Putin. He's at least reasonable. Not so. Not so on the other side of the coin. If the coin gets flipped and you end up with old Medvedev, things actually get worse, not better. So that's an important safety tip, you know. I always use, I don't even remember where I got that saying, important safety tip. But as you know, I'm full of anecdotes and little stories all the time, and I wanted to tell you about the last one of the funniest things I've used. So most of you know I was in a bad car accident back in '06 and was in a coma for 10 days or something like that. And so as I was coming out of it, I remember just a couple of things. First, my son Sam laughs about this all the time. He thinks it's just hilarious. He and my ex-wife, now my ex-wife and I were going through all kinds of divorce nonsense back then. We had, she'd file, I'd file, we'd get back together, she'd file, I'd file, we'd get back together, we'd get back together, I'd file, she'd file. We must have filed like 9 times. We didn't want to get divorced. Truly, we wanted to stay together. And but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way, right? But anyway, it was during this time that I had my car accident, and we were in the middle of one filing or another. But she came down. I knew her since we were 12, and so she certainly came down to check out what the hell was going on. And my son tells this story, and I don't remember it. I don't remember it at all. He said that I had the last so. I was in a true coma for like 8 days, and then for like 2 days I was in and out. But they kept me in a coma or something. I don't remember how they did it because I had a pretty bad brain injury. Maybe that's what's wrong with me. And at any rate, Sam tells the story. Sam Jr. comes in. He goes, him and his mom came in, and they were checking me out, and she's sitting there by the side of the bed, talking to me. And he says that I looked up, and I said, hey, it's Gollum. He said that I called her Gollum and I had called her Gollum. And I said, I called her Gollum. He goes, yeah, you told her she looked just like Gollum. He goes, I couldn't take it. He goes, I went outside. I was laughing. And I said, what did she say? He goes, she pretended she didn't hear it, but she heard it. And I don't know. It's a stupid story. I don't get it. But at the same time, the only reason I tell that story is because I used the words important safety tip, and I used to say it in the Army. Some sergeant major, some colonel would come up and tell you something to do. Now, don't do this. You're gonna. So you ever see these movies where you got these idiots trying to John Wayne shooting from the hip with a 50 cal machine gun, for example. You know, I can't even hold a 50 cal machine gun. And fire it at the same time. I can carry the damn thing. They weigh about 50 pounds, but the but firing it is a that's a joke. I shot it out of a helicopter once, 50 caliber machine gun, and that is exciting stuff. And I actually qualified to be a door gunner, which is stupid because I had no. But August comes along and they send you to all kinds of training that you'll never use, but they have the money for, and so somebody's got to go. So I suppose in a war, if anybody needed me, I could do door gunnery. But the most important thing I learned out of door gunnery, especially on a 50 cal that's mounted in a UH-1 helicopter, is that they're mounted that way for a reason. But even when they're mounted, the pilot was telling me, he goes, Trap, now I'm gonna circle the target, and you're harnessed in, you're strapped in so you don't fall out the damn helicopter, and he goes, your only job is when you hear it in your helmet, you hear me tell you to shoot, you shoot. He goes, you want to qualify? Don't move that gun. He goes, I will move the gun. And I said, how are you going to move the gun? He goes, I'm not going to move the gun. I'm going to fly the chopper. He goes, you let me fly the chopper and you just leave that thing pointed straight. You pull the trigger when I tell you to pull the trigger, shoot off 20, 30 rounds, and we'll go on the next target. I was like, okay. And he says, but you do this, and I go, oh, important safety tip, and then I'd say stuff like that. Well, so there I was in the hospital, and the day that I remember waking up, which was allegedly a couple of days after I called my ex-wife Gollum, and apparently I was very, very bad patient. I was a horrible patient. I had scars on my wrists and hands for the longest time. They ran out of places where they could put IVs because I kept tearing them out. And I'd rip up my hand, I'd rip up a vein, I'd be bleeding like a madman, just crazy dude bleeding, and I'd keep ripping them out. And then you have these food tubes, they got to keep you fed, so they put these tubes down your throat, and I would tear them out, and I would tear off all of the little beeping machines. I'd tear all that off. I was a pretty just a horrible patient. And here's what I remember waking up to. I remember waking up to a male nurse coming in, walking in the door, and I don't remember any. This is the first thing I remember. He goes, I see that you've ripped out your food tubes again. And he goes, you can't eat. You have to leave that in or you'll never be able to eat. And he goes, I also see that you have torn out all of your IVs again. And he said, that's also a bad plan. That's not going to do too well for you. He says, but I got one more thing to tell you. He goes, there's a little thing that, this little tube that we run through your penis. It goes through your penis and it goes up into your bladder and it expands into a ball about the size of a silver dollar when it gets up in there. He goes, if you pull that thing out, you're going to feel it. And I remember thinking, that's an important safety tip. So I don't know where that came from. Out of these stupid stories of things that I recall from just weird times, and car accidents and stupidity. But I have been, and I've had my share of stupidity in life, friends and neighbors. But I've been reading like a madman today. I have been putting a lot of thought processes in, and I've told you this before about what I believe about what the old Trump monster is going. He keeps the guy is so wishy-washy when it comes to Ukraine. And for the most part, he isn't, although I do have a little bit of problem with him calling calling for uh, tariffs and then removing the tariffs and then tariff days tomorrow and then gee, let's wait 90 days and then well, as long as they're going to be and I get it. He's making a deal. You got to be flexible when you're making a deal. I get that. But on the Ukraine side, I believe that he's being played. He's being played by, the big war people. I've told you that I disagree with it. He's being played by the Ursula von der Leyen's of the world. He's being played by Zelensky. I believe he may even be getting played by Putin. Now, he's a good guy, Trump. He's trying to end a war. He's doing what needs to be done. But if only he would just listen to me, from the very get-go. I've been saying the day he cut off Ukraine was the best thing he could have done to end this war. When Medvedev was at that conference today, at this legal conference up in St. Petersburg, Russia, he talked about all of the back and forth and the tug of wars going on between NATO, Ukraine, America, and anybody else who's listening. The Vatican, we were going to go to the Vatican, and he goes, all these options that people keep providing about 30-day ceasefires, about we're trying to solve the war once and for all. We don't want a 30-day ceasefire. We want the war over. And he goes, Ukraine does have another option available to it: capitulation. And that is true. I've been saying that. They're losing already. They've been losing forever. Their own media has stopped providing news from the front because there is nothing good, and you can't twist it any longer to make it sound good, to make it sound like Ukraine's winning. All of the mappers, and there's a good number of mappers that just keep the lines in Russia or from the Russian side keep inching forward, but they're not inching forward. It's a small map. They're actually gaining kilometers. They're gaining villages. They're gaining small towns. They're gaining space. They're destroying Ukrainians. Now Russians are dying too. I don't say anything about that. So when Trump is getting, I think I like to see what has happened the past week. Okay, remember last week and all the happiness on the European side last week when they all get together and they take the train and all these European leaders take the train and they go off to Kiev. Why? Because Donald Trump has said, we're going to sanction Putin. We're going to sanction him. Get your plans together and let's sanction him. He has to do this 30-day deal. Putin, you need to take this 30-day ceasefire. And Putin's going, whatever. We've told you what we're going to do. And there's no reason for us to do a 30-day ceasefire because all that's going to happen is Ukraine is going to rebuild. In 30 days, we're not going to have anything resolved. We want the war over, or we're going to go until capitulation. We're going to go until the end. Or, as Zakharova said, Maria Zakharova, she said, the 4 territories will turn into 8. 4 oblasts will turn into 8. And so all of the excitement of the Ursula von der Leyen's and the Emmanuel Macrons and Giorgia Meloni's of the world got twisted because the next day Trump talked to Putin. And what did Putin say? He said, well, we've always said we'd be happy to negotiate. We want to negotiate with Ukraine. We want this done, but we're not going to agree to a ceasefire. While we do so, there is no necessity to have a ceasefire while we negotiate. Why can't we negotiate without a ceasefire? I think we can. So let's. And then the next morning, what does Trump do? Zelensky, you better go. You better go talk to old Vlad. Vlad said he wants to negotiate and they want to negotiate directly. So get your ass to Istanbul. Get over there. We'll send some folks and you guys can negotiate together. You don't need us anyway. And you know what? That's probably the best thing that you could do. But Zelensky always wants some kind of a big brother force to have all of these people. He's been trying it for 3 years. I want to force Putin to do this, force Putin to do that. We aren't going to give up our territory. Well, okay, Russia will take it anyway, give it up or not. You've already lost 5, if you count Crimea from 2014. And if you're not careful, you're going to turn it into 8, like Zakharova said. So, yesterday, we have this nice discussion. I've heard quite a bit about it today, and I wish I could play somebody else's statements on it because I've heard quite a few interesting statements about what he said. Apparently, the big news over in Russia, which has got to just piss off Zelensky to no end, and all of your Italians, and all of your Germans, and all of your Macrons of the world are going, oh, geez, we're never going to get this done on our terms because now they're best friends. Putin and Trump are best friends, and neither one wants to get off the phone, and they're calling each other by their first names. So Vlad refers to Donald as Donald. No Mr. President, and no Mr. President the other way around. Vlad is what they're calling each other. Now, this has got to piss off anybody else. But the smart move, the smart bet is on Russia. I mean, that's the smart bet. Maybe somebody give you odds on Ukraine, and the only reason you should take it is because Donald Trump gets wishy-washy when it comes to, every time he talked to somebody, he changed. But he's also being pressed extremely heavily by the Lindsey Grahams, by even the Marco Rubios, although Rubio has said some really good things the other day. I actually played around on Truth Social today. I've had a membership on it forever, but I don't know. When I got booted or banned from YouTube and Facebook, I jumped on sorry for the yawn there. I jumped on Truth Social for a little bit. But here's what the old Donald, red, white, and blue face and all said. And I know you've probably heard it before, but I want to make some comments on it. Just completed my 2-hour call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Mother Russia, Russia, Russia. I believe it went very well. Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire, capital letter ceasefire, and more importantly, an all caps end to the war. The conditions for that will be negotiated between the two parties, as it can only be, because they know details of a negotiation that nobody else will be aware of. The tone and spirit of the conversation were excellent. If it wasn't, I would say so now rather than later. Russia wants to do large-scale trade, capital letters, with the United States when this catastrophic bloodbath is over, and I agree. There's tremendous opportunity for Russia to create massive amounts of jobs and wealth. Its potential is unlimited, all capital. Likewise, Ukraine can be a great beneficiary in trade in the process of rebuilding its country. Remember, they want Russia to fund that, to rebuilding of the country. Negotiations between Russia and Ukraine will begin immediately. I have so informed. I have informed President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, President Emmanuel Macron of France, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy, Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Germany, and President Alexander Stubb of Finlandia during a call with me immediately after the call with President Putin. The Vatican, as represented by the Pope, has stated it would be very interesting to host the negotiations. Well, let the process begin. How do you like that? I tell you what. I wonder why. So think about this. The old Finland, the President Stubb of Finland. So the Finns are crying these days on a similar note because so Finland and Sweden became members of NATO like right at the start of this war. Remember, everybody was convinced, and they convinced them that Vladimir Putin's goal was to take over the planet. Right? That was the plan. He's going to take over the planet. And everybody needs to know that he's going to take over the planet. And so, therefore, they quickly became members of NATO themselves. And so then what happened? The Russians and the Finns have had a great relationship for decades and decades. Finland has never been part of the Eastern Bloc countries. They've never been under Soviet control or anything like that. And they had all kinds of trade arrangements between the two. They were friendly partners. And now that NATO, the Finns have joined NATO, now they're all up in arms. They don't want army bases. They don't want NATO army bases in Finland. They have no desire for any of that. And now they're going, but look, the Russians are over there on the other side of the border, where they haven't had any for decades. Nothing. They were friends, okay? And now Russia is putting military bases right along the border. Now there are troubles between the two countries. They aren't as free with people coming back and forth. The Finns used to like to come over to Russia and drink and then go back home, kind of like Americans going to Canada. And it was a good deal. Well, now the Finns aren't allowed to come over, and they're not allowing Russians to come over, and they're intermingled. They're married. There's Russian is the second language of Finland, and now you got all kinds of problems. The rich Russians aren't coming over to shop in Finland. The rich Finns aren't going over to Russia to spend their money either. And who's to blame? Put some thought into that for a second. Who's to blame? And why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? So that America can have bioweapons in Ukraine? So that England can have the port of Odessa? These are nonsensical things. Anyway, there's much more to this war than just the fact that the U.S. wants to keep putting bases everywhere. I'm on the team that hopes that Trump backs out and takes at least half of the U.S. troops out of Europe. Get us out of there. As they've been talking about all these things. But I listened to the 4 or 5 minute blurb from Putin today. His take on the call with Trump, and his take on all of the good things that are occurring. And he said it was very positive. He said, we need to work together. We're going to attempt, but they aren't moving, he has not changed his position at all. And on the other side of the coin, you have Zelensky, wanting to know, geez, when's Trump going to come back to our side? And think about this. President Trump says as follows. Where'd he go? I have so informed President Zelensky of Ukraine. von der Leyen, and all these other clowns. He informed them of what they were going to do. There will be further discussions, and direct discussions between Ukraine and Russia. It doesn't leave a seat at the table for all of these other people. The Pope says you can use the Vatican. Come on down, hopefully, and let's get this all resolved. I'd love to see it resolved. I think it's about time. By the way, I forgot to tell you the news that if you'd like to join in the program tonight, phone numbers 573-746-8020, and I would be happy to hear your voice and to chat with you over whatever you would like to chat about. I am not against chatting with you. So, by the way, the feeds on my International Flavor website, internationalflavor.com, where my all of my radio programs are stored and recorded, have been. I appreciate all the downloads. I appreciate everyone clicking on the links and going in and listening to the show. And you can do it on damradio.com/podcasts as well. And the benefit of that is you can get the other great shows as well. Oh my goodness, is tomorrow Wednesday? You know what tomorrow is, friends and neighbors, right? Tomorrow is the biggest day in damn radio history. The biggest day on schedule is every Wednesday. Starts off with Damn Schwag. Gabby Hayes is on for a couple hours. He's interested in listening to. I like it. A really big shoe, or two of them. Then the Ike Skelton radio show and the International Flavor radio hour, which is really an hour and a half. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shows tomorrow. Very nice. Wednesday's a big day for us. So please tune in to damradio.com and listen live, and feel free to call back in. So when I was, and that's enough on I hope things go okay, but with this peace process, but I'm one of the people that thinks that capitulation is what is going to occur. If you go watch your Telegram channels from Russia, even the Ukrainian ones, like I told you, they aren't providing any good news about what is ongoing in the war efforts in Ukraine at this time. It's not going too well for them. And so there's just no good news to provide them. And since they're not reporting on it, we can only assume that they can't twist it to their benefit anymore. And Russia is continuing to destroy them. That's everything that I see when I get on and see the stories of the day. It's always a bloodbath, and it's always Russia picking up more territories. It's extremely rare that you hear that the Ukrainians have made a counter offensive somewhere. Now, right now, the Russians are starting their summer offensive is what I think. I think they're bringing along the summer offensive and trying to get cracking on that. And so pay attention to it if you, or just listen to hear them. But you aren't even hearing about the war anymore. It's or about the bloody parts, about the territorial parts. All you're hearing are the efforts to attempt to resolve it. It needs to be resolved truthfully, and I really hope it does get resolved quickly. Anyway, one of the things that I was very impressed with, remember I told you on May 9th, I actually watched the full parade. I watched Putin's speech. I watched quite a few things on television to make sure that I knew what they were, because I also was very pleased that there was no terrorism, no attacks, nothing like that from the Ukrainian side. But what I intended to do and never did back then was, it's only been a week or two, 12 days, is tell you something a little bit about the weapon systems that they have. And one of them, there's so many of them that you could go back and see these pictures on, and they are not the same weapon systems from when I was serving in the military. Some of the ones that we memorized, were the SS-20 and, stuff like that. We would follow the T-72 tanks, and you wanted to know what the enemy was, and which I wonder even then if they were really our enemy. I don't know that they needed to be even then, and or they weren't a democracy, right? They were communism. We have to get rid of communism. We got to eradicate communism from the world. I don't give a rip about communism. If somebody wants to be a communist in their own country, what does that matter to me? What do I care? In all seriousness, once again, just like England, make the world England was their motto way back when. And when they were colonizing, the French colonized, the Dutch colonized, the Spaniards even did some colonization. And, that's the world we lived in. Well, America's been engaged in colonization for 100 years now. And or longer, we took over officially from Britain. I can't remember who said this. I wonder if it was Jeffrey Sachs that said it. I can't remember, but I heard this in the last week that somebody said America officially took over the rank of colonist in chief from England after the Bretton Woods conferences in 1945 after World War II. And how do I want to put this? I don't want anybody to come back and go, that Trapp's a communist. No. I said I don't care about communism. I wouldn't prefer it in my own country, and I hope it doesn't come to my country. But it's frankly, it's in a perfect world. What's wrong with it? If it was a perfect world. The trouble is that it isn't a perfect world. And therefore, communism won't work because people are not perfect. And therefore, they don't put up the effort that they should, because they're going to get the same anyway. It's an economics deal, right? It's all economics. If you're going to get the same anyway, why would you put up that much effort? Excuse the whole supply and demand curve. You don't have to put up as much work, but you get the same amount of benefit. That's communism in a nutshell. So therefore, nobody put out the way they ought to. They didn't provide. And so, at any rate, I always sidetrack myself, and I apologize for that. If you don't want me sidetracked, give me a call, and we won't get into sidetracking. We will have a frank and honest discussion, just like the one between the old Trumpster and the old Putin. Who, one other thing that somebody was reporting on, said that neither one wanted to get off the phone first. So they were friendly to each other, calling each other Vladimir and calling each other Donald, Donald and Vladimir, and not President and President. They were on the phone for 2 hours, and neither one wanted to exit the telephone call. And they talked about a wealth of information. And so that can't be good news for all the Europeans, but it is good news for us. Anyway, as I was saying, I wanted to tell you some of the things about some of the weapons that they passed along or that they paraded on the on Red Square on May 9th. Excuse me. And it was the parade of weaponry. Let's see. One of the ones I always liked was the TOS-2, the Tosachka thermobaric MLRS, multiple launch rocket system, MLRS, and thermobaric. Okay. The TOS-2 Tosachka is Russia's latest heavy flamethrower system, replacing the TOS-1. Built on a wheeled Ural chassis for mobility, it launches thermobaric munitions capable of devastating enemy fortifications and personnel. So thermobaric are extremely frightening because it's a double tap, it's a double punch. And if you don't understand it, I'm going to give you a brief explanation. There's and this launcher carries 18 thermobaric rockets. They're highly effective in suppressing enemy positions and in supporting infantry advance. Okay, for going forward. You know why? Because a thermobaric weapon is extremely dangerous. Let me give it to you. Thermobaric weapons, sometimes referred to as enhanced blast weapons or vacuum bombs, and the vacuum bomb is probably more appropriate, and their common subset, fuel-air explosives, have been used in various conventional weapons by militaries and even improvised explosive devices, IEDs, by non-state actors. These weapons are said to have been used in Afghanistan, Middle East, in Syria, and in Ukraine, and even in terrorist attacks in Bali, Indonesia. There are a number of different names for this category of weapon, and fundamentally, all of these names encompass weapons with fundamentally similar operating characteristics. Once these characteristics are understood, the mechanism of making the weapons are actually not complicated, but they are massively destructive, by the way. I'm adding that part, especially to people. Hence the ability of non-state actors to deploy large-scale IEDs with such effects. First use of, well, I don't want to read all of these. I want to get to where they are, because basically what it does, where's the paragraph I wanted to read? What they do is a thermobaric weapon shoots the weapon. You have the first detonation, which spreads a chemical of some sort, an accelerant, a flammable, and then a second explosion that burns oxygen, sucks all the air out, but blows up at the same time whatever the fuel is that they have introduced. So the first explosion spreads out all this fuel. The second explosion ignites the fuel, sucks all the oxygen out of the air, and fries the people that are in the range. So the Tosachka is a bad, it's a bad weapon, and we have our share too. So don't go thinking that we don't, because we do. So the Tosachka was out there. The Iskander-M tactical missile system is a big one that everybody needs to know about, and the Iskander-M has an operational range. It launches both cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, operating range 500 kilometers. They've expanded their role to include maritime strikes. They take part in exercises involving simulated nuclear strikes. All system components are mobile. The launcher and reloading units are mounted on a MZKT 7930 chassis, great big one. That's a 16-wheeled job. That is just, they're huge, and they do it on a Kamaz. So I've been driven past the Kamaz factory several times, and Kamaz is Caterpillar, basically. Kamaz is a very huge factory in Tatarstan, Russia, and they put out some huge trucks for the mining industry and for the military. And let's see what else they got. Yars intercontinental ballistic missiles, the BTR-82 Alpha armored personnel carriers, where all these things were on parade. The BTR-MD Rakushka airborne APC armored personnel carrier. It's huge. You wouldn't believe it. And then they have the BMP-1AM Basurmanin. I mean, you can find all these. There's a whole go and look for it. Here is the kamikaze drone. So I did a little bit of digging for you. So what the Russians have done and what they have started doing, and they're the first, is they have started mounting these rail systems with these Garpaya and Garan kamikaze drones. And they're big. These are big drones. And you can reload them on this rocket launcher sort of thing. They're wheeled. They're mobile. Reloadable. And they go out and they shoot these big drones off, and the drones fly up and go somewhere else. And these drones can be launched from anywhere, because one of the biggest problems with launching drones is everybody knows where you launched it from. Well, if you're mobile enough, you can get out of there, and then it's not a big effect. Plus, what they've started doing is now these smaller drones are being like the smaller ones that can be launched by the platoon, if you will, that are out on the front line. So the platoon's carrying around 100 small drones, but they're controlled from 10K back. So basically, they just put a new one out on the ground. The control pod module comes up, and somebody controls it from 10 kilometers back, uses it to, instantly uses it. You don't have to go 2 miles back, and you don't have to, the linkage and the use of them is immediately available. And they're making them all, obviously disposable. They blow up when they get there. And so if the frontline units are taking 100 of them, I don't know. This drone stuff is going crazy. Did you see the new ones? That the mothership ones that the Russians and the Chinese and even America has said that we've put out some of these massive drone motherships, is what they're calling them. And there was an interesting story. I don't know that I'll play it tonight. Maybe I'll play a little bit of it. Where'd she go? Her name is, should we listen to Samarya Zakharova? She doesn't speak English, of course, so no, we can't really do that. Here she is. This is, let's see if we can listen to her. She's going to tell us a little bit about these drones. Where is she? I don't want it to be too loud. It was pretty loud in my ear. I just don't know if it's going to be too loud for you.
Chinese media is calling it a drone mothership. It's hard to describe in words, so take a look at this animated video first.
It's showing an enormous plane-style thing dropping from the air from one big drone, 100 mini drones.
That's the drone mothership. Its name is Jiu Tian, which means sky high. It was unveiled at a Chinese air show last year, and now it is almost ready for deployment. The ship will be tested in the coming days. If the tests are successful, it will be commissioned by the Chinese army. Reports say its first mission could be in June, next month. Now, I know that video looked very impressive, even scary. But how capable is this drone mothership? What sort of weapons does it have? And what will it be used for? Let me show you the specs first. This ship has a wingspan of 25 meters. Now, to put this in perspective, most fighter jets have between 10 and 13 meters of wingspan, 10 to 13 meters. This one has 25 meters, so this mothership is double the size. It can carry up to 6 tons of bombs and drones. The maximum range is 7,000 kilometers, and the maximum altitude is up to 15,000 meters, meaning it can fly over most medium-range air defenses. Of course, the highlight is the drone system. The ship's belly opens up on both sides, and once open, it releases a swarm of drones into the air, around 100 drones simultaneously. And this is clearly the USP. Other countries also have drones of similar size, like the American Global Hawk and the MQ-9 Reaper. But the Global Hawk cannot strike targets, and the Reaper has less firepower. So in that sense, this Chinese mothership is unique. Beyond the drones, it also appears to be fitted with missiles, both air-to-air and anti-ship missiles. Which brings us to the most important question: what will it be used for? Mainly to take out air defenses. You fly this mothership close to enemy airspace, you unleash the drones target the air defenses, and mission accomplished. Or so the Chinese are hoping.
Interesting, huh? I like it's pretty neat, and it's a huge mothership. And I'm sitting there going, well, if it's such a huge mothership, how come it's only releasing 100 drones? Because it looks like it could hold, 500-600. So I don't know. It might be worth knowing some more about it. But always nice to know your weapons. Here's some. What else do we have? Russia is not afraid of Western sanctions. So let's assume that the war doesn't end, and that Trump, in his next flip-flop, goes back and says, "All right, let's do some more sanctions." Vlad and I are friends on the phone, but I got to put some sanctions in. These people in Europe are driving me nuts, and I got to put them in. What does that do? Does it do anything? I say no. I say it does nada. Doesn't do anything. And it matters not whether he implements sanctions or not. And more importantly, will it change what Moscow does, what Vladimir Putin does, what Medvedev says? Absolutely not. And I only read half of this, and I'm going to read at least that half to you because it was a pretty good article. Russia is not afraid of our sanctions, nor should they be, by the way. They don't work. Russia is used to Western pressure and isn't concerned about new sanctions, says Dmitry Peskov. He was commenting on a new round of sanctions recently imposed by the UK. So the UK is going to do it anyway, right? Keir Starmer, the genius, is gonna make sure that he wins single-handedly the Ukraine war. We already know what we will do once the sanctions are announced and how we will minimize their effect, Peskov told journalist Pavel Zarubin on Saturday. Russia has learned effective ways to counteract Western pressure, he said. Therefore, scaring us with sanctions is pointless. I happen to agree, and everybody should. It's stupid. Ooh, I'm afraid of sanctions. On Friday, the British government announced what it called the largest ever sanctions package against Russia, targeting its oil transportation network in order to deliver a blow to the country's energy revenues. Now, I'm not saying it isn't going to affect what happens. I'm saying it's not going to change what Russia does. The new measures blacklisted 100 more oil tankers that the West claims are part of a Russian shadow fleet. older vessels operating outside of Western insurance systems. And that's another big moneymaker for the West, right? Western insurance systems. And so the rest of the world is trying to figure out how to get out of the Lloyd's of London business. And it's working, by the way. So they are operating outside of Western insurance systems. Who gives a rip? You know, why should they continue to work inside of Western insurance? Why should the insurance all be paid only to the West? Since the escalation of the Ukraine conflict, successive British governments have introduced more than 2,000 sanctions on Russian individuals and entities. Moscow has said the move will not harm the Russian economy and will instead increase energy costs and inflation in Europe, just like the other sanctions did, just like the other sanctions continue to do. And so all of these anti-trade efforts are doing nothing more than, well, I'm not saying they don't have a minimal effect, but they hurt Europe far more than they hurt Russia. Moscow has said the move will not harm Russia's economy and will instead increase energy costs. Earlier, President Trump called for unconditional ceasefire. The U.S. and its partners will impose further sanctions. He said, that's where I keep talking about wishy-washy. The old Trumpster is wishy-washy. Here he was a few days ago calling for an unconditional ceasefire and saying, if you don't do it, we're going to throw some more sanctions at you. And now he's telling Zelensky to get to the negotiating table, even if there's no unconditional ceasefire. So, that's I wonder if Trump's a Putin stooge. He's a Putin puppet, kind of like me and anybody else who says anything positive about Russia or fails to say anything negative, I suppose you could also say. In March, Russian President Putin said that a total of 28,595 sanctions were imposed on Russian companies and individuals in recent years, more than the total number on all other countries combined. According to the president, the West sought to eliminate Russia as a competitor, but the Russian economy has only grown more resilient. Now, I got to tell you, I haven't been to Russia since October of last year, but I saw an economy doing pretty well. I did a lot of shopping, did a lot of purchasing of things for myself, and I wonder if it's still the same now. Can't tell you. Maybe someone from Russia could call me at 573-746-8020 or join in on Discord. Join us, and I can bring you up on Discord if I can figure out how to do it. I think I can. Another Russian arms, they just are mocking some of the Rostec is champion, the bloc, the NATO or the EU is the champion of meaningless measures. So they're making jokes about it. Okay. And here's another one. Russian state-owned defense conglomerate Rostec has dismissed the latest EU sanctions as ineffective. On Tuesday, the European Council approved the bloc's 17th round of sanctions and restrictions targeting Russian individuals and companies. Commenting on the package, Rostec told Novosti that the West just can't stop trying to bring down Russian industry. If Russia is the champion in terms of the number of sanctions imposed upon it, then the EU is the champion of meaningless measures, said the company, stating that the bloc's sanctions would achieve nothing. I happen to agree. Here's some more on the phone call. And this is by a guy And this is kind of a long article, but I do want to read it to you in its entirety because I think it is a pretty good uh, 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 discussion. Putin ends the charade. Trump call puts the brakes on the West's diplomatic offensive. As Russia and Ukraine resume direct talks in Istanbul and Europe's ultimatums fade, the spotlight turns to Putin-Trump phone call. This is written by a guy named Sergei Poletaev. He's an information analyst, publicist, and co-founder of the VAT4 project, which I haven't looked into yet, but I want to find out more about what it is. It's an interesting article. In recent weeks, the focus of the Russia-Ukraine conflict has shifted from the battlefield to the diplomatic arena. Political actors on all sides have turned their attention to shaping the terms of a potential settlement, or at least a framework for future negotiation. The latest phase began with a coordinated visit by Western European leaders to Kiev. Back last week with that joke of a train ride with Starmer and Merz and Macron, and concluded for now with a phone conversation between Russian President Putin and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump on Monday. But the centerpiece of this shift was the unexpected resumption of direct talks between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul. What's unfolding is not just a conversation about peace, but a broader contest over influence and strategic direction. Competing visions of how the conflict should end or be managed are colliding in real time. Western Europe is scrambling to maintain relevance. Ukraine, as always, by the way, is caught between urgency and uncertainty. And Trump, now at the center of this geopolitical tug-of-war, is being courted by both sides. So who's really winning the shadow war of influence? And what happens if the diplomatic front collapses? Let's take a look. And it's interesting. I don't think Istanbul means a whole lot, but hopefully it'll help out. On May 10, leaders from France, UK, Germany, Poland all traveled to Kiev. Their message to Russia was blunt. Agree to a 30-day ceasefire or face new sanctions, buddy. You're going to get more sanctions, and we're going to give more European weapons to Ukraine. Did you also hear that, heard on another one that I watched today, that the Australians are sending 45 mothballed M1 Abrams, probably the A1 version, tanks to Kiev. They're no longer of any use in Australia, so they're going to send them to Kiev to use. They'll be destroyed pretty quickly because they already aren't upgraded. They're already old, and so it's I don't know if they'll even have the and how are they going to get them there? Seriously, this wasn't surprising. Peace initiatives led by Trump and his advisor Steve Witkoff had stalled by early May, creating an opening for the war party led by European globalists, figures with whom Kiev has naturally aligned for obvious reasons. But there's a problem. Europe is out of weapons and sanctions. Germany? What am I talking about? Germany still has a few symbolic Taurus missiles tucked away like heirloom jewels, but even if it decides to part with them, the numbers wouldn't meaningfully shift the balance in the battlefield. Nobody has any weapons left, people. They just don't. This leaves the Western Europeans with one real move left. That's it. Convince Trump to back their agenda, boxing him into a policy that is not his own. I've been saying the same thing for weeks. This leaves the Western Europeans, I'm going back and reading, can't see straight. That same evening, Putin made his own counter move. He publicly invited Kiev to resume direct peace talks in Istanbul. With that offer, the Russian president set the terms of negotiation himself, signifying, well, I don't know why he had to signify that Russia holds the advantage, because everybody knows they do. And Ukraine has more to lose by dragging this out. Quite true. What else did he do? He sidelined Western Europe entirely, effectively discarding Witkoff's peace plan in favor of talks not about token ceasefires, but lasting peace on Russia's terms. It was also a clear act of diplomatic trolling, inviting the Ukrainians back to the very same negotiating table they had walked away from 3 years ago in Istanbul, with Vladimir Medinsky once again leading the Russian delegation, the exact same team going back. Talks in Istanbul were more than just posturing. Despite trolling, Russia sent a relatively heavyweight delegation. The head of military intelligence, top deputies from the foreign and defense ministries, and a cadre of seasoned experts. This is the sort of team you'd expect at serious negotiations, if the parties actually shared common ground. They don't, at least not yet. Still, the talks were more substantive than was expected. Neither side stormed out, and the discussions were described as constructive. Most notably, the two sides agreed to continue talking and to carry out the largest prisoner exchange in the conflict so far. This exchange is structured as a one-on-one, one-to-one swap. 1,000 prisoners from each side, nearly all captured Russians, and roughly 1/6 of the Ukrainian POWs. The original goal was a full exchange of all for all. Excuse me. So the current results clearly favor Moscow. Let's see here. I've long argued that the only path to lasting peace lies in a direct Russia-Ukraine agreement. This would require Kiev to renounce its anti-Russian posture and accept Moscow's terms. I think they ought to just capitulate at some point. It's probably going to happen anyway. This would require Kiev. And this can only happen if Ukraine ditches its alignment with the European war lobby led by Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer. Just last Thursday, that seemed impossible. Ukraine's Zelensky was grandstanding, demanding that Putin come to Istanbul, insisting on an immediate ceasefire and more. But curiously, Western Europe wasn't invited to the Istanbul talks at all. No EU officials were in Turkey. The ultimatums issued just days before, ignored by both Moscow and Washington. While the talks proceeded in Istanbul, Zelensky flew to Albania for another round of photo ops with Macron and company. The timing of that trip seemed like a deliberate distraction. If so, it failed. The Istanbul talks dominated the headlines, and images from Albania barely registered, except for the bizarre kindergarten-like setting of the Macron-Zelensky meeting. Western propaganda might have cast Istanbul as a meeting of Putin's lackeys and Albania as the nerve center of the free world, but public perception tells a different story. So why did the Istanbul talks go better than expected? Because for the first time in 3 years, Ukraine dropped theatrics and sat down for a real conversation. Well, that's absolutely true, too. Let's see. Perhaps someone in Kiev is finally realizing that the longer they bet on Western Europe's failing hand, we're always in talking poker, aren't we? The harder Ukraine's eventual collapse will hit. Maybe it's not Zelensky himself, but somebody close to him. If that's true, we could be looking at an internal split in Ukrainian leadership. By the way, a general just quit the Ukrainian last night. Where is that? See if I can find that. Damn it, I must have gotten rid of it. Maybe that's one of the videos I wanted to play. I think it was in English too. The obsession of the Ukrainians and the Western Europeans with an immediate ceasefire is telling. A year ago, Kiev insisted that no talks could begin without Russia's full withdrawal, NATO guarantees, and more. Now, just a month-long pause is all he wants. Why this shift? Because without U.S. backing, the Western European states know they must become Ukraine's rear guard, replacing Washington. But to negotiate from a position of strength, the bloc would need to confront Putin directly, something like leaders like Macron and Starmer are unwilling to do. So instead, they lean on Trump to pressure Moscow into a ceasefire to buy time and prepare Ukraine for the next round. The fight for Trump. Right now, the real battle is for Trump's favor. If Putin convinces him to drop the ceasefire demand, I think he already has, Ukraine may be forced to fold. Where did Trump's ceasefire first idea come from anyway? It echoes dozens of Cold War-era conflicts in which international powers froze hostilities to manage crises indefinitely, often using UN peacekeepers to keep the lid on. Trump seems fixated on that model. His team echoes his thinking, even as only because he's being sold a line of crap by the Lindsey Graham types of the world and the old style military leaders of the world, well, at least in the U.S. Sorry, at this point, he has two realistic options. Keep drifting with former U.S. President Joe Biden's failed policies. This guy's like listening to me. He's got to be. A win for the war party, or start pulling the U.S. out of Ukraine altogether. That's my answer right there. He may have already made up his mind. We'll know soon enough. Why does it matter? It matters because under Biden, Washington carried the full weight of the conflict. The scale of the conflict today exists only because the U.S. saw Moscow's moves as a direct threat to American power. But after a failure of the sanctions and military escalation in 2022, the U.S. mostly coasted along. Well, just providing money, right? Now, after the Istanbul meeting, Trump says he wants to handle war and peace with Putin directly. That is bad news for Kiev and Brussels, who've been scrambling to insert themselves into these talks since February. Their latest attempt, the Kiev ultimatum of May 10, was flatly ignored by both Washington and Moscow. Final call. It's likely that yesterday's Putin-Trump phone call centered on the ceasefire. Putin's goal? To persuade Trump that his idea of an unconditional pause plays right into the hands of Ukraine and the European war lobby. A ceasefire must lead to a lasting peace, not just another pause before the next escalation. Right? I agree with that, by the way. Trump has blasted Biden's policies as catastrophic. Now Ukraine and Western Europe are trying to lure him into continuing under Biden's efforts under a different name. And they're not even hiding it. They plan to use any ceasefire as a window to resupply, regroup, and escalate. Western European troops entering Ukraine are now openly discussed. The hell, they're already there. Naturally, Russia cannot accept that on its borders. An unconditional ceasefire now wouldn't bring peace closer, it would bring us closer to World War III. Sustainable peace is only possible if Ukraine and its European backers abandon their current policies. And Trump can't back them, people. And based on the statements following today's call, Trump seems to be warming to this logic, which means the diplomatic round that began on May 10 goes to Russia. It's been 10 days, and no one's even talking about the ultimatums made in Kiev any longer. I found that rather complete, and I like it. Where is this general that I wanted to tell everybody? Oh, here it is. This is talks about it, and it's in English if I can remember, but I may have to read some of it to you. I think I do, and it's one of those ones that plays all the music. It drives me freaking bananas. But I want to read it to you because I can't find the story anywhere else. It's too loud. I wonder how I turn it down. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to read it to you anyway. And basically, there's a general, Alexander Shirshin, commander of Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade, has resigned in protest, blasting military leadership for senseless orders, political games, and unnecessary loss of life. He accused commanders of prioritizing punishment over results, claiming their assessments do not match battlefield reality. Shirsin, who led combat in Russia's Kursk Oblast in 2024, called for generals' children to serve on the front lines. Yeah, that was put out by Times of India, and nobody's really putting all that much information out on it, and it's hard to find. I'm going to see if I can find a little bit more. There was another one for funny stories. Let's have some. What's my buddy he's not my buddy, but I listen to his Clown Worlds, and he has his Clown Worlds at the end. This is definitely on the Clown World side. Ukraine-born model is suspected in an arson attack on a British PM's home. A Ukrainian-born model has become the second suspect to be charged in a UK arson investigation involving properties linked to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Romanian citizen Stanislav Karpiuk, 26, was charged with conspiring alongside fellow suspect Roman Lavrinovich, a Ukrainian national who was detained last week, and others in a series of attacks targeting locations in North London, according to a statement from the Metropolitan Police on Tuesday. Karpiuk was arrested Saturday at London's Luton Airport by counter-terrorism officers who were called in because the properties are connected to a high-profile public figure. He appeared at Westminster. I'm slobbering today. What's going on with me? He appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court on Tuesday morning and was remanded in custody till a further hearing alongside of Lavrinovich on June the 6th. According to British media, the targets of the arson between May 8 and May 12 include a car once owned by Starmer, his private residence, and an address he used to live at. Karpiuk is believed to be the same individual listed as a male model based in London. According to public profiles, he was born in Chernivtsi, a town in western Ukraine with significant ethnic Romanian population. The Daily Mail reported that Karpiuk is an aspiring actor and works in construction. Lavrinovich, who's 21, is a Ukrainian national, was arrested Tuesday last week. reportedly runs a building company and also is signed with a modeling agency. A third suspect, a 34-year-old individual whose identity has not been released, was arrested Monday, and he also remains in custody. Both Karpiak and Lavrinovich have been charged with reckless endangerment of life. According to the Telegraph, the Starmer family home, located in Tufnell Park, is currently rented by the Prime Minister's sister-in-law and was occupied during the attack. Starmer condemned the alleged arson, calling them an attack on all of us, on democracy, and the values we stand for. Wasn't that important? Well, it could be because of this. Okay, this is one possibility. So Ukrainians in England are losing all their freebies because the law that was giving them the right to live in Britain is expiring. So thousands of Ukrainians are at risk of losing their jobs and housing in UK amid uncertainty over visa renewal, the Telegraph reported on Friday. Around 270 Ukrainian citizens currently live in the UK under special schemes such as Homes for Ukraine, which offered 3-year visas to those fleeing the conflict with Russia. The scheme has been closed to new applicants, and existing visas are beginning to expire. While a new Ukraine Permission Extension Scheme allows 18-month visa renewals, applications were not accepted until February 4, creating a backlog and leaving many in legal limbo. According to a survey of 1,100 Ukrainian migrants, 41% said they had lost job opportunities. 22% have been denied contract renewal due to their uncertain immigration status. Around 26% said they could not renew their rental agreements, while a quarter were able to sign new leases. And respondents also report mental stress. They're under stress, with 43.5% citing anxiety and panic attacks related to their immigration status. More than half of the Ukrainian refugees surveyed said they have school-aged children, which adds to their concerns. Oh, horror story. Can you imagine? Oh, can you imagine stopping these programs to give freebies? And I'm not sure what all to do about this. We're doing something similar in the United States. I'm not sure how that's panning out for people, but I'm very concerned that somebody might lose a job. Oh, terror. We're going to go to an opinion piece. What else did I have up here in the top? Putin ends the charade. We already had that. This one was pretty funny. Donald Trump has allegedly helped ancient Russians defeat space lizard people. Western elites don't want you to know about this. And this is important. So you see the Slavyansky, and Slavyansky is he looks like a lizard. So Donald Trump is now a lizard. Heroic Slavic warriors triumph over evil reptilian invaders to pounding beats of music. These surreal showdowns have racked up millions of views and spawned a wave of spin-offs, including video games, comic books, tabletop RPGs. What started as a mock academic lecture quickly turned into a full-blown cultural phenomenon, fueled in part by some deep-rooted medieval nostalgia. One of the most well-known stories in the ancient Rus versus the lizards mythos is the tale of how Russian hero Danila Trompov drove the accursed lizards from the Slavic states of America. In this fictional legend, a Russian version of Donald Trump defeats a shadowy alliance of humanoid lizards who are supposedly aided by Bill Gates. Trump wields imaginative techniques like the Republican egg squeeze and the Texas burger bomb, and even manages to sabotage the lizard lobbyists by replacing the dollar with the ruble. In the end, the forces of Slavic justice prevail, and the lizards are forced to retreat to the distant planet of Nibiru. This is just one installment in a sprawling fan fiction universe created as a joke, but which has grown far beyond its origins. What began as a light-hearted parody has developed into a full-fledged narrative world that mixes satire, absurdity, and pseudo-history, while poking fun at the cult of Russia's supposed ancient supremacy. In March 2023, a strange YouTube video appeared, starring an AI-generated character introduced as Professor and four-time historian Alexei Sergeyevich Bagirov. Speaking with an air of authority, the professor unveiled what he described as the long-suppressed truth of Russian history, that the ancient Rus civilization once stretched across nearly the entire Earth. His lecture combined several familiar conspiracy theories, claims of lost civilizations with advanced technology, an ancient war between humans and shape-shifting lizards, divine intervention by pagan gods, and secret documents hidden from the public. His arguments leaned heavily on loose word associations and secret documents, while the visuals featured intentionally janky PowerPoint slides with exaggerated animation accompanied by loud, distorted background music. But the creators went further than simply remixing old conspiracies. They built a whole new mythological framework. According to Bagirov, the ancient Rus not only coexisted with dinosaurs, they were actually friends. He explains that the word dinosaurs derives from the old Slavic root dino, meaning child, and that the name of the Slavic pagan god Zavra identifies him as the divine ancestor of all dinosaurs. In a follow-up video, Bagirov adds a central stylistic twist to the saga, the Slavic reinterpretation of all names and terms. He describes how dinosaurs played an important role in the daily lives of Rus. Brachiosaurus Brachioslav helped build houses and studied astronomy. Styracosaurus Stavroslav took part in mammoth hunts, and a pterodactyl named Pterodomir flew children to school. In the third video, Bagirov introduced the main villains, the lizards from the planet Nibiru, an idea familiar to fans of post-Soviet conspiracy. In this universe, the lizards are jealous of the glory of Rus and want to destroy it. Their weapon is deception. They try to seduce Rus with fake science, especially mathematics, and to that end they dispense agents such as Euclid, Archimedes, Democritus, Plato, and others, each programmed with 2G radiation to infiltrate the ancient region of Russo-Greece. Through all of this, Bagirov satirizes the genre of amateur pseudo-historians who emerge. The characters of the Rus and the lizards soon found a second life in short-form video content. These clips featured AI-generated visuals, voiceovers in mock series tones, and of course, rock soundtracks. The volume of content rapidly multiplied, and Rus vs. the Lizards universally continued to evolve. I got to get to the Trump part. Come on, where are we? Where? The game started as a joke. We knew that, but it turned out to be so popular. In the spring of 2025, a sequel was released with improved graphics, game script, and even the support of a large Russian business. Shortly after the first of the game's release, major Moscow-based publisher began producing comic books set in the same universe. Titles include Rus vs. Lizards in Africa, Rus vs. Lizards on the Moon, The Revenge of Drakislav. The last name is a cheeky play on a vulgar Russian. Oh, I never caught that. It's Drochislav. I pronounced it wrong, and that's why I never got there. To drochit is to play with yourself. Let's put it, but it's a gross way to do it. It's a vulgar way, whacking off, something like that. So next game, tabletop role-playing game. Now, I don't know why I'm reading this to you, but where is the Donald Trump? Come on, I read about him. Imagining ancestors that never were. Yes, the ancient Rus vs. Lizards universe is over the top, funny, and self-aware. But part of its staying power lies in the gap it fills. For various historical and political reasons, modern Russians know significantly less about their own medieval past than, say, the British know about Anglo-Saxon England or the French about Charlemagne's empire. Most of what we do know about the 9th and 11th centuries, a crucial period for medieval storytelling, comes from primary chronicle, a dry and formal chronicle of the events in early Rus. Aside from a few famous rulers, we know very little about their daily lives, beliefs, or personal stories of the people who lived during that era. So while Russia has real medieval figures, it doesn't have a vibrant mythic tradition of legendary heroes. No King Arthur, no Roland, no Ragnar. Attempts to fill that gap with fiction often fall flat. The characters are too perfect, the dialogue stiff, the plot too generic. These stories lack strangeness and spontaneity. Ancient Rus vs. Lizards managed to succeed where others have failed. Its characters are noble, it's invented its own ancient language, and however ridiculous, it always leads to good defeating evil. Storylines like the Russian Jewish army storming Lizardburg are absurd in the best way possible, strange enough to be funny, but structured enough to be entertaining. And of course, the mythos doubles as a satire vehicle for commentary on U.S. politics, Ukraine, and other hot-button topics, always in high demand with the Russians. You ought to see the pictures that they have of the old Trumpster as a lizard. So I like to watch this thing called Comedy Kloop, and they have a guy on there who's a great Putin. He looks just like Putin. And then they have another guy who's a really good Donald Trump, and it's pretty funny to watch them going at each other. One of the ones after Trump won the election had him riding in a taxi cab with Xi Jinping. It was pretty damn comical, and they have some just hilarious stories, and Russian humor is actually quite funny. Well, I've pretty much wasted an entire program talking about very important issues like Donald Trump helping get rid of the Russian lizard people that were attacking ancient Russia. And I hope that something useful comes out of the talks, the continued talks for peace in Ukraine. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. I would love it if you listened again tomorrow night, just because it's fun to do, and we can talk some more. Tomorrow night is the big night. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and so it'll be a long day, but we shall listen to it all and discuss. If you ever want to go back and listen to the program, any recorded programs, you can go back and listen on internationalflavor.com. You can go to damradio.com/schedule and get the full schedule and follow us all, which is certainly something that everyone should do. I appreciate y'all being here. I hope you join in again tomorrow evening. My brother's coming in this week. It looks like I think we're still on for Thursday, although we may not be. He may change his mind tomorrow. As far as I know, he's still on for our continued talks of governmental conspiracy theories. You have a very good